You know the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. I mean, we all do. But what if the version we know is just scratching the surface? What if it's not a simple story about a snake and an apple, but actually a deep, profound theological puzzle? A puzzle that starts with a command from God that seems like a total contradiction.
Right out of the gate, we run into this major paradox. God gives Adam and Eve two really important commandments that, when you look at them, seem to cancel each other out. So how could they possibly obey both? This question, right here, is the key to unlocking a completely different way of looking at the whole story. So to figure this out, we can't just stare at the two rules and get stuck. We've got to zoom out. We need to look at the bigger picture. What was God's ultimate plan? And we have to understand a fundamental principle called agency.
And here's the dilemma, plain and simple. On one hand, you have this command to progress, to build families, to have the full human experience. But on the other hand, you've got a command to stay put in a state of innocence, a state where fulfilling that first command was literally impossible. They couldn't have kids as they were. So what gives? Well, the answer really hinges on this one powerful idea, agency. You see, real choice isn't just picking between vanilla and chocolate. For a choice to actually mean something, you have to understand the consequences. You need opposition. You need to know the difference between good and evil. In their innocent state, Adam and Eve didn't have that knowledge, so they couldn't truly choose. They were put in a situation that would force a choice that would finally open their eyes.
And this leads us to a concept that is absolutely central to the Latter-day Saint perspective. It's often called the fortunate fall. Now, instead of seeing the fall as some horrible mistake that messed up a perfect world, this way of thinking sees it as a necessary and even planned step forward in our human journey. Let's just walk through the logic here for a second. God's whole plan is about growth, right? Well, that growth requires us to make real, meaningful choices. But a real choice requires knowing the difference between good and evil, and the only way for them to gain that knowledge was to leave the innocence of the garden. The fall wasn't plan B. It was the event that unlocked our potential.
Okay, now this distinction is absolutely vital. Did Adam and Eve sin? In this view, the answer is no. Because they were innocent, like children, they couldn't willfully rebel against a law they didn't fully understand. It was a transgression. Think of it like this. They crossed a boundary that moved them from one state to another, from innocence to mortality. It was a necessary step, not some malicious act of rebellion.
This verse from the Book of Mormon just perfectly captures the heart of this fortunate fall idea. It completely reframes the whole event. The purpose of the fall wasn't to bring sadness and suffering into the world, but to make our very existence and ultimately our joy possible in the first place.
Okay, but wait a second. If this was all part of some master divine plan, what about Satan? He's the bad guy, the one who tempts Eve. So where does he fit into a plan that's supposedly so wise and all-encompassing?
It's a fantastic question, isn't it? I mean, we're taught that Satan is this incredibly powerful and intelligent being. So how on earth could he make such a classic blunder? How did he end up playing a starring role in bringing about the very plan he was trying to tear down?
The answer, according to this view, really boils down to pride. Satan's intelligence was huge, for sure, but it wasn't infinite. He just couldn't see the whole chessboard. His all-consuming arrogance and his thirst for power completely blinded him. He thought he was derailing God's plan, but he simply could not wrap his head around a plan where a fall was actually a step up. He completely misunderstood what true power even is.
And that's just the ultimate irony of it all. In his rage and rebellion, Satan became a necessary tool. He provided the opposition, the other choice, that agency required, and by doing that, he helped push Adam and Eve into mortality, accidentally setting the stage for the entire plan of salvation that he so desperately wanted to stop. So as you can imagine, this unique understanding of the fall creates a massive fork in the road in Christian theology. It leads to two completely different views on human nature, on guilt, and on our entire relationship with God.
So, let's look at these two competing ideas. First, you have the doctrine of original sin, which says that Adam's guilt is basically passed down to every single person at birth. And then you have the principle of accountability. This teaches that we inherit the consequences of the fall, things like death and struggle, but not the actual guilt.
I mean, when you put them side by side like this, the differences are just stark. Was Adam's choice a tragic sin, or was it a necessary transgression? Are we born guilty, or are we born innocent? Was the fall a complete disaster, or was it a fortunate step forward?
The answers to these questions change everything that follows.
And what's really fascinating is that both of these viewpoints go to the scriptures to support what they believe. The traditional view often points to interpretations of passages from the Apostle Paul or from the Psalms. The restored view, though, brings in modern scripture from books like the Doctrine and Covenants and the Book of Mormon, which are seen as clarifying these very points, especially when it comes to the innocence of little children.
This is the second article of faith of The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it's about as clear a statement as you can get. It puts accountability right where it belongs, on the individual. We answer for our choices, not for a choice someone else made thousands of years ago in a garden.
So, you might be thinking, okay, this is interesting, but why does it matter? This all seems like ancient history, really abstract stuff. But the way we see the very beginning has a profound effect on how we see ourselves, our purpose, and even how we see God today. Just think about our view of humanity. Is our story one of inherent corruption? Are we born fundamentally broken? Or are we born innocent, with a spark of the divine inside and an infinite capacity to grow and progress? I mean, that's not just theory. That changes how we feel about ourselves and how we see our own kids.
And of course, this gives us two very, very different portraits of God. Is he a vindictive judge who condemns babies for a sin they never committed? Or is he a loving, merciful father whose brilliant master plan, including the fall itself, was designed from the start to give his children the chance to experience joy and become more like him?
This scripture from the Pearl of Great Price just sums up that second view perfectly. It tells us God's entire motivation. His work isn't about judgment or finding fault. It's about lifting us, helping us progress, and bringing us home. It's a purpose that is completely rooted in love.
So in the end, that's the question this all really boils down to. When we look back at the Garden of Eden, are we looking at the scene of a crime that has stained every one of us? Or are we seeing the courageous, necessary, and ultimately fortunate first step of our shared human journey?